welcome back to another episode of Broken But Better podcast. I'm your lovely host, Mariah, and I'm super excited that you are here. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome to the family. If you are a returning viewer and subscriber, thank you so much for staying down with your girl, a part of this journey. I'm super excited that you're here. We're going to jump right into today's topic. And today's topic is more so a confession. I have a confession. Hi, my name is Mariah, and I'm overcoming people pleasing. And you may say, Mariah, how did you even get to this point? Or what is a people pleaser? How did you even know you were a people pleaser? Well, I'm going to read off a couple of things that characterize someone as a people pleaser. One is someone who repeatedly forgives people who refuse to change, not expressing your feelings when you're upset, taking on more than you can handle even when you're very tired, not standing up for yourself when people are disrespectful to you, being passive with your concerns and your issues, being a crutch for others when you're burnt out, always apologizing first during conflict because you can't stand others to be upset with you, being everyone's support system but your own, saying yes to things and regretting it later, going along with things when you're not happy about it to avoid creating friction, feeling pressured to be friendly, nice, or cheerful at all times. Lastly, you avoid advocating for your own needs by saying you're fine when you know you aren't. Hi, my name is Mariah, and I'm overcoming people pleasing. This list that I just read off to you was how I lived my life for a good amount of time. To be honest, I didn't even know I was a people pleaser until God began to center me around people who were able to see some of my shortcomings but not expose my shortcomings. I remember back in 2020, if you've listened to previous videos, you know 2020 was a pivotal year in my life. 2020 was a year that I opened up my heart to God, but also it was a year where I know I needed therapy to help me along the way. I believe in Jesus and I believe in therapy. And I remember in 2020, I was in therapy and I probably was crying about something or going off on a rant. And my therapist stopped me and said, "You put a lot of energy in controlling how people see you." And in that moment, I didn't identify it as people pleasing. I didn't identify as that I was quick to say yes to people or be there for people, because if I showed up for people, then they would see me as a kind person. I went on with my life. And then in about last year, like I mentioned, God began to bring me around people and godly friendships. And I remember a friend, or more than one friend, brought it to my attention that I struggle with conflict. And if anybody knows me, I'm quick to say I don't have time for it. Like I'm quick to just kind of remove myself from a situation if I know it's going to require me to have a difficult conversation. I avoid difficult conversation, or I should say I did avoid difficult conversations at a drop of a dime. No matter who you were, what the situation was, I would remove myself. And I would chalk it up as in, I don't have time. I also would be available for everyone all the time, whenever they needed me, regardless of how I felt. And to be honest, I thought I was just simply being kind. If anyone knows me, also will know I'm a kind person. Like I truly enjoy being kind to people. To me, it takes nothing. It takes no effort for me to be kind to people. I truly enjoy helping people. But what I didn't realize is I was walking a very fine line of being kind, but also being a people pleaser. And when my friends brought that up to my attention, the very first thing that I went back to was what my therapist told me in 2020. Because in that point, I could no longer control how people see me, because now I look at it as a weakness. You see something in me that I've been trying to mask this entire time. But what they probably just seen was I was tired. I wasn't speaking up for myself when I knew things were wrong. I would show up for people even though I knew I couldn't show up for them, or I shouldn't be showing up for them. And I believe that God placed me around those people to point those things out. But in my mind, I felt exposed. I felt like you were seeing weak parts of me, and I can no longer control the narrative of being the strong friend or being a kind friend or just being cheerful all the time. They were beginning to see who I truly was. And I remember going back to therapy and I was like, we need to fix this. Like I was almost like in a tizzy, like we need to fix this. We need to fix this. And my therapist was like, do you want to fix how people see you, or do you want to get to the root of why you're a people pleaser? And in that moment, I wanted to end therapy because nobody asked you. What I really needed you to do was give me the answer to fix how people see me. And I really had to bring the two together. I had to bring the two worlds together. I had to go spiritual, and I also had to bring my therapist into play and say, what is this, God? And why have I lived my life as a people pleaser for so long? Why has this list that I just read off to you been my life? Why have I always said yes to people when I really didn't want to? And why have I disguised it as me just being kind, but in actuality, I was a people pleaser? Why do I have a hard time sticking up for myself? Or when I know things are wrong, instead of me voicing my opinion, I'm quiet, even though my opinion may be right? Or why do I rather people be more pleased with me than me being pleased with myself? And I really had to get to the root of this. If you haven't learned anything from me yet in these podcasts, is I was not afraid to ask God questions. Because if I didn't know the answer, so I trusted in him to give me the answer. And when my therapist said, why are you so content with being a people pleaser, or where did this come from? I didn't know. I didn't know where it stemmed from. And she gave me 3 categories of different types of people pleaser, or why people become people pleaser. One is the desire to be needed. If you're needed, then there's some value in yourself, or you've created some type of value within yourself. Another example is you want to be accepted. You want people to accept you how you have presented yourself. And then another is you want people to only see you one way. And I found myself at sometimes really in those last 2 categories of wanting to be accepted and wanting to control how people see me. Because I went back through different examples in my life where I would speak up and I wouldn't get the response that I was expecting. Or I would show up unapologetically myself, but I wasn't accepted by people that I truly thought were my friends, or thought that loved me just for who I was, because either I was being too bold or I was being too outgoing, that I began to suppress who I truly was to make sure that I wasn't making other people feel uncomfortable. But then also that if I showed up kind, it was easy. If I showed up as a yes person, God was going to reward me, right? I think the enemy will play tricks on us that if we do for people, that's our value. If I could do so much for people, I'll get accolades. And remember, in past episodes, my accomplishments was who I was. So if I can accomplish things for people, I had value in that. And if we're not careful, we will allow people to put us on a pedestal. And then when we disappoint them, they'll diminish us, and now we have no value. What I didn't realize with people pleasing also is that I was disappointing God. I was quick to say yes to people, but I was also quick to say no to God. I wasn't able to silence out everything else because I was so caught up in how I felt. Because a lot of times what we don't realize is that people pleasing also gives access to pride. It allows pride to come in, that we have now centered everything around us because we have got in our mind that people need us, or that I'm not accepted, so I have to make myself be accepted, or I can control the narrative. And pride can also cause manipulation, where you're now manipulating people to only see you one way. And I was disappointing God because I didn't realize that I was also being disobedient. I wasn't saying yes to God in the best way. I was wrapping it up as, or disguising it as if, God, I'm just being kind to your people. I'm doing everything you want me to do. And God is like, but I didn't tell you to do that. You have gotten so comfortable with doing that you're not being who I called you to be. Because when you are 100% yourself, everything that you are required to do will line up with you. I didn't see it as that. And before I even got to the point of seeing it as that, I remember praying and saying, hey, God, can you take this away from me? Like, take this people pleasing away from me, because 1, I don't like how people are now seeing me, because 2, it has burdened me for so long, and I have allowed it to take place for so long that I don't even know who I am anymore. I can't even see past all of it because I have poured myself into other people. And I thought God was going to take it away and it'll be just like that. But what God was doing was then positioning me to then deal with the very thing that I was running from. He was positioning me to practice saying no to people. He was positioning me to have uncomfortable conversations. And a lot of times I would be in those places and I would just revert to saying yes because it was comfortable. Undoing the people pleasing and being delivered from people pleasing was very uncomfortable. It was so uncomfortable that it was just easy for me to say yes. But every time I said yes, I was getting no peace. Every time I said yes to somebody, or I didn't speak up, or I was being burnt out and I was still showing up, I had in the back of my mind is I'm disappointing God, and I'm also being disobedient. In everything, I was not getting peace. For example, one time I had to appear at a church event for something that I was volunteering for. And I know deep down inside I wanted to say no. But those things started to come back up to say, well, I'm just going to be kind and they really need me. They wouldn't ask if they didn't need me, or if I don't do it, who's going to do it? And on my way to that event, I remember just crying because I was tired. One, I was very frustrated. I had a really bad attitude that day that anybody could have gotten it. But I'm also praying at the same time, God, just let me show up with a smile on my face. Just let me show up cheerful. And what I felt as if in that moment, God had taken his presence away from me. And that was a scary feeling, to not be close to God because I was also being disobedient to God. Because God isn't going to stay somewhere where I'm being disobedient or where I shouldn't be because I want to be somewhere that he told me not to be at. And I got no peace. So in the midst of me pleading with God for you to just be with me, God, help me through this, I'm also beating myself up. And I got to the event and I know I didn't give my 100%. I know I didn't show up as the best version of myself. I know I showed up and I was short with people. And I was quick to do things and not think about somebody else. And I was now bleeding on people and hurting people because I was hurt. And I remember getting in the car, was like, I never want to feel like this again. I never want to feel like people are not getting the best version of me all because I've been disobedient to God. I never want to disappoint God in the way I have. And I remember just surrendering and like, God, I'm going to do it how you want to do it. The next opportunity I get to say no, I'm going to say no because you told me to say no. The next opportunity it's time for me to speak up for myself. I'm going to speak up for myself. I really had to allow God in those areas that I've been doing for so long based off of how I want people to see me. I had to get away with that thought that it's okay if people don't see me how I want them to see me. The most important thing is, do I see myself how I should be seen? Am I treating myself how I should be treated? Because also what I learned with people pleasing, I wasn't loving myself correctly. I was loving doing for people more than I was loving doing for myself. I had more of a fear for people than I had a fear for God. And the Bible tells us we shouldn't fear no man. Like we should never fear man. We should only fear God. I began to almost like disrupt. I began to dismantle myself and say, God, I'm broken again. I need you to help me. I need you to help me overcome this people pleasing. And over a period of time, over some months, new opportunities came up. And one thing I think people don't talk about when it comes to being obedient to God is that it doesn't always feel good. Because the very next time that I got the opportunity to say no to somebody, I thought that I would feel good. That when people would ask me, hey, Mariah, can you do this? Knowing that I couldn't do it, knowing that my schedule was already booked up, or just because God said so, I said no. I thought I would get peace right away. I thought I would feel good about it. But just because you're obedient with God doesn't mean it's going to feel good all the time. Especially when it's uncomfortable territory. Especially when it's new for you to disassociate yourself with people pleasing. I just felt like every week God was giving me an opportunity to make sure that I was being obedient to him. And I would say, God, this is the opportunity presented to me. Here's what's on my calendar. Here is where I am at mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Do you want me to do this? And sometimes God would say, yes, I'm giving you the freedom to do it. And in that freedom to do it, there was no struggle. There was no second guessing. There was peace that he was opening up that way for me to do it. But then in other instances, it would take me sometimes days to tell people no. Somebody would say, hey, Mariah, can you do something? I would prefer to leave them on red than to deal with it. And God was like, you're not going to avoid this one. You're going to deal with it, and I'm going to give you the language to deal with it. Regardless of how people think of you, my opinion should be more valued with God than it is with man. I should want God's approval more than I want man's approval. That's more valuable than somebody not liking me or somebody not accepting me. Because what the enemy will do is, the enemy made me feel like the more I say no, the less opportunities I will have. The less opportunities people will call on me to be used. But man cannot, or people cannot open God has opened for you. I remember one event in particular, it was a really good opportunity by people that I truly respect that was like, hey, Mariah, I want you to do this for us. And I felt honored to do it. I felt like no opportunity gets better than this. And in my reply back, I'm like, yes, I would love to do it. God, I feel like God told me to stop. And I feel like I was bargaining with God, like, but God, this is a really good opportunity. You should want me to do this. And God said, no, I need you to say no. And in this point in time, there was no reason for me to say no. My calendar wasn't booked. I felt more energized. I felt like I had been through previous weeks and previous months of being obedient to God and saying no to people and not showing up for everybody and having uncomfortable conversations. But this one in particular, God, I've been praying for this one. And I think this is going to be the best opportunity. I feel like I was bargaining with God. And God was pretty much saying, are you going to be obedient to me and trust me? Or are you going to say yes to these people and you don't know what's behind that door? I wrestled with saying no, but I also wasn't getting any peace with saying yes. So I'm literally on my phone typing yes and then backspacing no. Then I'm typing yes. Like I went back and forth with it. And I finally came to, I'm going to say no. And I said no. And I was so afraid about what the people were going to say. But a lot of times we will psych ourselves out of something that was never going to happen in the first place. Like I was just ready for them to be like, well, why you don't want to do it? And this is a great opportunity. Like I was so ready for that. But in their response, it was more so like, we understand. We'll call you next time or whatever the case may be. But I had allowed people to tell me how much I was worth based off what I could do for them. I had made that up. And one thing that people pleasing would do is you will make it about people, but it's really about you. I can't put this weight on other people. It was, Mariah, you need to dig deep in why are you a people pleaser? And realize how you have put your destiny and your value in the hands of other people. How dare you do that? I became to get angry. At some point I was angry with myself. Like, how dare you let people tell you who you are? How dare you let people tell you how good of a person you are, how kind you are, when you know who you truly are? So in my saying no, it was also God's protection, because weeks later, another opportunity came up that was better than this opportunity, that was for the same day. I would have been booked for the same day. And God was like, now I'm in this opportunity. But had you said yes to them, you wouldn't have been able to say yes to a God opportunity, because not every good opportunity is a God opportunity. What I didn't realize is that my no was more powerful than my yes. What I realized that my obedience to God was more powerful and more important than the approval of man that I was searching for, but God was already giving me the answer to. How dare I seek people's approval when my maker has already approved me, has already appointed me, has already anointed me? How dare I want to go after what people think of me? God had to sit me down and say, you don't even truly love yourself. And I was offended with God, like, but I love myself. I think highly of myself. And he was like, if you did, you wouldn't chase after people pleasing. You don't love yourself to say I'm tired and not show up for people. You don't love yourself enough to stick up for yourself and identify when something is wrong. You're quick to say, oh, I'm fine. I realized I had did that so much in my personal relationships when dating that I was just like, yes. Like it didn't, I would bottle it up. Even though if I knew it was wrong, I would bottle it up to not even address an issue because I didn't want to make the other person feel less than. But God said, you don't love yourself in doing that, Mariah. And God had to give me my voice back. He had to show me that there was power in my voice, because a lot of times what the enemy will do is this people pleasing is really something to minimize who you truly are. It's really to quiet something in you. And for me, what I didn't realize was that the enemy was quieting my voice. The same voice I'm using to speak to you. Imagine if I never overcame people pleasing, and something that I'm still working on with, that I have to say no to people, and my no is no and my yes is yes. I have to identify that it's okay to have difficult conversations, and be okay if somebody doesn't agree with you right away. And be okay if someone is mad at you. If they truly love you, they won't stay mad at you forever. If they truly love you and value your opinion and who you are, they'll understand that it's coming from a place of kindness. Because that's true kindness, when you can correct someone, when you can tell them what's right and versus what's wrong. But I also think about, if I didn't have a voice, how could God trust me on a platform to tell people about who he is if I couldn't truly stick up for who I was or who he created me to be? How can I go talk to someone who's a non-believer and tell them the values in which God has instilled in me if I can't even speak up? It's almost as if the people pleasing was trying to minimize my purpose. That the enemy was going to wrap this people pleasing up and disguise it as kindness, but what it really was slowly pulling me away from God, because I couldn't hear God in people pleasing. I couldn't see God in people pleasing, but I'm steady calling on God and wondering, God, why aren't you answering me? It's because this people pleasing, I had it on a pedestal. I idolize being kind to people. And somebody once said, when you idolize something, is something that you love more than your obedience to God. When we make idols out of something, what it truly means is you love that more than you love your obedience to God. I love being kind more than I love my obedience to God. I loved being kind more than I love my obedience to God. I had to go back to God and say, tell me what kindness truly is out of your lens. I had to go to God and say, I'm not loving myself accordingly. Show me how much you love me. I had to ask God, teach me how much you love me. I had to get back into the presence of God and say, God, I haven't been hearing you well because I'm operating out of my own will. I need you to guide me. Who do I need to help? Who do I need to be there for? Who do I need to show up for? Because what'll happen is eventually I would have gotten so tired that now I'm angry with people. Now I'm entitled and I'm walking around bleeding on other people. I'm now so grateful for my friends to be able to say, hey, Mariah, you suffering over here. And I think you need to fix this, because if you don't, it can end badly. That baby, now when I say no, I mean no. When I speak up for myself, I speak up for myself. But sometimes it doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it doesn't always make me the most likable person in the room. And what I had to realize is I have to be okay with that. I have to be okay that not everybody's going to like me. I have to be okay with everybody's not going to like my response to certain things. And if you don't, that means you were never meant for me. I have to be, what also people pleasing taught me is to stand firm in what I believe in. If I believe it and don't nobody else believe it, that's okay, Mariah. I had to be okay with, if you don't see me as a kind person, that's a you problem, not a me problem, because I know what's in my heart. I know I don't walk around with evil motives, so it's no reason for me to overcompensate to prove to you that I'm a kind person. That's another thing that I learned. Why am I trying to prove to people that I'm a kind person? If I be a kind person, I don't have to overcompensate to do a kind person. I had to really allowed God to continue to mold me and mature me. And what I realized is that I was not only maturing physically, mentally, and emotionally, but I was maturing spiritually, that everybody don't deserve my kindness either. Stop pushing your kindness on people because not everybody is going to accept you. Stop doing for everybody because when you need it, I don't want you to feel like they owe you something, because nobody owes you anything. You did that because you wanted to do it. And I had to be careful that I didn't want my heart to be tainted. That I can still show up kind to people. I can still show up unapologetically myself, but also loving myself enough to say, you know what? That's not for me to do. I need God to do that for you. Because if we aren't careful, we will then become enablers of people. People pleasers have to be very careful that you don't become enablers. Because now you're getting in the way of what God is doing. I thought about it. What if I am a hindrance to what God is doing for someone else? What if I am hindering people from getting to God because I have always inserted, or I keep inserting myself in a situation that God is meant to help them from? Now you're making people switch roles. Now they're seeing you as God and not seeing the God that's in you. Now they're seeing you as a blessing versus the person who gives the blessing. Now they're seeing you as a God. Like, what I don't want to do is be put on a pedestal for men to diminish me and the men to bring me down. Like, you got to be careful that you don't become an enabler, because you got to answer for that at the end of the day. Not that person who's constantly taking or you're giving it. A lot of times we think that person just taking from me. No, you are freely giving yourself to this person. And I had to go back and reanalyze a lot of things. Mariah, how are you showing up and serving in church? Are you showing up as an enabler? Are you showing up as a people pleaser? Or are you doing things because God told you to do it? How are you showing up for your family? Are you always at their beck and call, getting them out of situations that God's saying, I need to get them out of? Are you being there for a friend, but not being there for yourself? Do you have a listening ear for them, but you don't even have a listening ear for me, Mariah? Like, God was really working on me. And it wasn't easy because it was a me thing. Yes, people were involved, but I was the common denominator in this. I was putting myself in these situations. It got to a point that the phone calls did stop. It seemed like because I was saying no, that those people who were needing me weren't calling me anymore, or who I thought needed me weren't calling me anymore. And I had to be careful to not then turn it into, God isn't going to do it. Or I had to be careful to not mask it as my value. I had to be very careful with that, because the enemy will play tricks on you to make it seem like, well, God can't use you anymore because you keep saying no to everybody. You have to be careful that you don't become a double-minded man to say, should I do it? Should I not do it? Should I do it? Should I not do it? The Bible says a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. I had to be clear, God, there can't be any confusion in this. That if I'm going to say no, I'm not going to go back and think, well, I should have said yes. And because a lot of times God will let it play out in front of you. That because you said no, then you get on the internet and you see it happening without you, and you have this fear of missing out spirit. I had to be certain in who I was to say, because I said no doesn't make me less than or make me less needed. And I know my value. I know what I have to offer. And when my yes is yes, I'm giving them my all, because God allowed me to give him my all. I'm giving them a yes, knowing that I'm partnering with God, that I'm not doing this out of my own strength, but God has predestined this opportunity to take place. When I speak up for myself, I know I'm not speaking from a place of malice. So whoever takes it, if they take it as offended or offense, or if they take it as malice, that's a you problem, not a me problem. What I did was I also had to be appreciative and repent and tell God, I'm sorry that you created something in me. You designed me, you designed a purpose in me, and I have minimized it for the comfort of men. Do you think Jesus minimized who he was to appease those who weren't a believer of him? I really had to do some deep dive work. And it's something that like I said, I'm still dealing with. I've gotten better at it. I've gotten better at saying no. I've gotten better as choosing my battles. Not everything needs for me to speak up, because what I am comfortable in is that God will fight my battles. What I have now realized is that in my people pleasing, I was controlling also how I thought people were going to treat me. I'd rather say yes to you than you think you can take advantage of me. And what I now have understood is no one could ever take advantage of me. Because if you're taking advantage of me, what you're really doing is taking advantage of God. And the relationship that me and God have, if you take advantage of me, maybe God gonna deal with you accordingly. But I had to understand that. I had to not allow people to hold how they see me. It was almost like, God, teach me how you see me so that I can see me like that and appreciate me. Because if I see God, if I see myself how God sees me, baby, I'm dangerous out here. Like, no one can tell me anything. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons I had to learn is that, Mariah, you got to love yourself when nobody else going to love you. You got to appreciate yourself when nobody else is going to appreciate you. You have to applaud yourself when nobody else is going to applaud you. You have to know what you believe in is what you believe in, regardless of who else don't believe in it. You got to stand 10 toes down and say, I'm unapologetically me. I'm authentically me, and appreciate and mean that. I no longer feel like I have to overcompensate who I am. I walk into rooms and I love myself. I walk into rooms and know what I have to offer and know that no one can take those things away from me. Because in my people pleasing, I was so busy holding on to who I wanted people to see that if I released that, or if I didn't hold on to that, people would then be able to tell me who I was. People would then be able to tell me where my value lied. But in that, I learned that God was the only one that could tell me. And also in that was that my obedience to God should be my number one priority. My yes to God should be more important. I don't even think you realize I got to hear God in the most clearest way. I began to get better direction of what direction I should be moving in life and where I should be going and where I should scale back and who deserves my attention, who deserves my time. Because I also realized that I was giving my time to the enemy a lot of the times, that I was tiring myself out, that the enemy was like, I don't need to tire her out. I just need her to say yes to these people and keep people pleasing, and she'll tire herself out. I'm going to sit over here while she doing that. What I realized is that people who I thought valued me didn't even appreciate me or didn't even see who I truly was and all of the gifts that I truly had to offer. But when I began to start to say yes to God, he began to put people around me. He began to give me opportunities that no man could shut me out of. He began to expose me to different things, all because I was no longer concerned about how people see me, but I was more concerned about how God sees me. Following God and understanding who God is in you or who you are in God have really just opened my eyes to a lot of behaviors that I thought was normal, but really wasn't normal. I think a lot of times people don't even realize they're people pleasers. Like, I didn't know I was a people pleaser. I didn't understand the concept, but I think that a lot of things that we are doing, we just chalk it up as normal, or I seen my parents do it, or I seen my grandparents do it. I think a lot of things we have to unlearn and take it to God and say, but God, how do you see this? I had to ask God, who in the Bible was a people pleaser? Who in the Bible had a hard time with saying no? Hagar was a good example. Hagar tried to run from conflict when it came up with Sarah. Hannah was constantly picked on by one of her sister wives because of the things that were going on in her life. That I think it's easy for us to avoid conflict. I think it's easy for us to run from conflict because a lot of times we think it's draining for us. Like conflict is draining. But I also had to be mindful that if God is going to allow me to speak up, he's going to be with me. The Bible tells us, I am with you. I am with you. So when I had to have uncomfortable conversations, I wasn't speaking from a place of hatred. If anything, I had in the back of my mind, I am with you, and that my delivery is going to be heard whether they hear it or not. That when I walk away from this conversation, I have still been pleasing with God, even though it was uncomfortable. God began to put me in uncomfortable situations, but also in my no to man and yes to him, it opened up way more than I could have ever imagined. It opened up so many new opportunities. It opened up so many new avenues to show me how much I didn't love myself, to now loving myself more and putting myself first at times when it was necessary. It also made me depend on God more, because in my people pleasing, I think that I lost somewhat of dependency on him. I was doing things out of my own strength until I was tired, and God allowed me to be tired. I was wore out. That now I'm able to say, why would I want to show up to an event or show up for someone or be a listening ear for someone when I don't even have it for myself? I'm quick to say now, if somebody called me and say, hey, I need to do da-da-da-da-da, I need you to listen. Hey, I only got 10% today. I don't have 100%, so let me get back to you. How can I pour from an empty glass? God isn't requiring us to show up for people when we don't have enough to show up for ourselves. But if I'm not going to God to constantly be poured into, I'm going to be pouring from an empty glass. It should be a ripple effect. God pouring into me, I'm pouring into somebody else, and then it goes on and on and on. But if I'm not quiet enough and still enough and obedient enough to hear from God, he won't be pouring into me. That at some point, whatever was in my cup is gone. And now I'm bleeding on people. I'm showing up and I'm hurting people. My problems become their problems. I'm now building trauma bonds with people. So many different things that I didn't realize people pleasing was opening up, that if I would have continued down that road or that pattern, I wouldn't have been the best version of myself. One thing I did hear in therapy that my therapist mentioned to me and said, and I'm going to leave this question with you. The amount of energy you put into other people, what if you put that same energy inside of yourself? What version of yourself would you be? I'm going to say that again. The amount of energy you put into other people, what if you put that same energy into yourself? What version of yourself would you be? When I was asked that question, I thought it was a rhetorical question, but he wanted an answer. And I began to cry because I began to see myself as what I could be. But I wasn't that, because I was so busy doing for everybody else. I was so busy mentally being available for everybody else, emotionally being available for everybody else. It was almost as if God was giving me a glimpse of this person. Like I was the most beautiful, kind, smart, outgoing, in shape person. I feel like I was moving, I was shucking and jiving. Like I feel like I could do anything. But it was like I could see that person, but I wasn't being that person. And when God gave me that image of myself, I said, God, how could I be that person? How could I be that best version of myself that shows up and still have enough to give people, enough to give myself, but most importantly, I'm giving you my all? Because I felt like I was in a ratio, and it was people, then God, and then me, and that was completely backwards. I had to be so aware at that point. And the reason why I can now sit in here and have this conversation with you is because each and every day I'm striving to be the best version of myself that I could ever be. How could I give you something and I'm not the best version of myself, or making progress to get there? I truly see how I went from broken to better, because I didn't realize that people-pleasing version of Mariah was so broken. Because I thought I knew at that point I had an idea of who I was. But I was putting Mariah on the shelf to make sure that everybody else was good. I was even putting God on the shelf to know that I was disappointing God and being disobedient. It really hurt my feelings. It really was like, God, I'm sorry. I have done you wrong, and I didn't even realize it. I want you to ask yourself, in what way are you people pleasing? Are you saying yes to people all the time because you say, if I don't do it, who's going to do it? Are you saying yes because you have put your value in what you can do for people, in people pleasing? Are you a people pleaser because you don't want to deal with the consequences that come with you speaking up or having to deal with conflict? I'll use even one better example. I didn't even realize how people pleasing was showing up in my corporate world, in my workplace. Like, when it's time for a raise, I know that I'm worth this, but I don't want to say anything because I don't want to ruffle any feathers. I don't want to be labeled as an angry Black girl, even though I put in the work, the time, the effort, my experience, all of these things. I'm not going to say anything because it may make somebody say you being greedy or you don't deserve it, because I've made up in my mind what people will think of me if I speak up. But what if God said, speak up? I'm telling you to speak up. And I'm disappointing God and being disobedient to God because I'm so worried about what they're going to think about me. Ask yourself, in what area have you allowed people pleasing to enter in? And if you're like me, you may go back and say, God, I need you to help me with this, but be prepared for God to put you in situations to have to address it. I pray you don't have to suffer as long as I did from 2020 to 2023, but I also pray you do get the right people around you that won't expose you, but they will help you and point out those things to you so that you may be aware that you can overcome people pleasing, because now I'm an overcomer. I no longer say that I'm in people pleasing. I'm overcoming people pleasing. And I know that one day this won't be a part of my everyday struggle. I know that this is a preparation for what's next in my life, that I just won't take anything from people. Anything that I'm presented with a pretty bowl, I have discernment enough to say no. I have the right discernment because I know God is with me to say if this is a God opportunity or a good opportunity. So I pray through my lens, whoever you are, whether you're a mother, you're a daughter, you're a son, you're a father, you're just a friend or a brother or sister, that you don't allow people pleasing to be how you live your life. Because you'll do for everybody else. And then when it's time for you, they may not be able to show up for you in that way. And I would hate for you to build up anger in your heart and that your kindness is then taken for weakness and you no longer have a kind bone in your body because you have allowed people, not people have done to you, but you have allowed people to tell you who you are and what you have to offer. You have allowed people to walk all over you. You have distanced yourself from God, because that's most important, because people pleasing is a sin. I'm going to just tell you. And sin moves you further and further away from God. People pleasing causes you to make idols out of people, and making idols out of people pushes you further and further away from God. Because what I learned in that is God is a jealous God. Those same things you're saying yes to, God will take those people away from you. And you didn't have the opportunity to be built back up in him. So now you've hit rock bottom and you church hurt, you people hurt, you crazy out your mind hurt, and you are now going out saying, well, they didn't do it for me. One thing my therapist did tell me, they don't owe you nothing. You may have done all this for all these people, and they may turn around and say, well, I never asked you to do it. How would that make you feel? I'm fortunate enough that I didn't have to hit that rock bottom, but I had people around me. So if you don't have people around you, I'm your people right now. You need to overcome people pleasing. You need to say no to them kids who keep asking you. You need to let your sons and your daughters or your family members or your friends, sometimes God got to do it and you not God. And if you feel like you have a hard time saying no, when the situation comes, take a break, take a moment. Before you reply, before you insert yourself to be a problem solver, ask yourself, God, is this something you want me to do? Do you want me to be here? And if so, God, this needs to come with peace. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I thank you so much for tuning in. Catch me next episode. Make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. I will see y'all later. Love y'all. Bye.